Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and welcome to another special week of reviews. Yes guys, this is Disney Animated Movie Week. Yes, this batch of reviews is all Disney animated films from Walt Disney Animation Studios. Yes. And to start off Disney Animated Movie Week, well, yes, you read the title, of course, and you know exactly what it is that I am now about to finally review. Not to mention, this one Disney animated film is celebrating its anniversary, so yes, and yeah, 'cause I tell ya, this one being in the lineup of those Disney animated films where, yeah, sadly, had really bad luck. But yet, at the same time, there are those, including me, that actually like and enjoy this this one Disney animated film, along with some of the others that's right next to it, like, say, Treasure Planet, Home on the Range, maybe say Chicken Little, need I go on? Just, yeah, you get my point. But yes, that's right, guys. I am now reviewing from 1985, The Black Cauldron. Yes, Disney's The Black Cauldron, because, yeah, like I said, it's unfortunate that when this movie first came out, yeah, it's not exactly as Disney, those at Disney at the time were hoping for this to, how they were hoping for this to be and such. And the fact that, yeah, The Black Cauldron came out around that time when, I'm sure as we all know, Disney around the late 70s and early 80s were going through a dark time and such. I mean, throughout the early 70s and such, they were turning out some pretty good, decent, successful animated films, but they weren't on the exact same level as, say, those, from, like, say, the Golden Age, right there next to, say, Snow White, Pinocchio, Bambi, Dumbo, but not to say that they were bad, yeah. And not to mention that, around the time of the late 70s and early 80s, the old folks at Disney, those that were part of Walt's 9 Old Men, they were retiring, and new faces that were coming straight out of, say, Cal Arts were stepping in as the new animators, and this was especially around the time when Fox and the Hound happened, because some of the old masters of Disney being involved in the Fox and the Hound, with the addition of the new animators that stepped in, like, say, Ron Clements, John Musker, and Glenn Keane, and even Tim Burton. Yeah, Tim Burton, whom was a part of the animation crew of the Fox and the Hound. I'm sure some of you know, yeah. And also the same goes for Brad Bird, John Lasseter, and, yeah, Don Bluth. He was working at Disney for a while, but, yeah. But the more I talk about it, just, yeah. And, yeah, because, yeah, with the first things I have to say about The Black Cauldron itself, yeah, because, well, one of the first times I remember watching and seeing this movie fully was when it was on, say, I remember watching it during the good old days of when Toon Disney was around, before it would then be called Disney XD. Yeah, so I do remember that it was shown on Toon Disney, and I have some vague memory of when watching it on television, and I'm sure that, yeah, with how much I can remember of it, I liked it, and I thought the main antagonist of the movie was really cool. And later on, when I watched it again, and I was invested in it, and especially, like, say, with some of the music and score, and with the main villain himself, just, yeah. Yeah, and just revisiting it / rewatching it, and on account that here I am now doing my review, yeah, I mean, again, it may not have been the best hand-drawn animated film Disney did in the early 80s, but, I mean, that's not to say it's god-awful as, like, say, some of the other ones that would come out later. I mean, just, and besides, like, later on, the film itself would grow a cult following, and it would have its lovers, and kind of like a cult classic from the 1980s, technically, for some of us. Yeah. And it was another interesting piece of fantasy that Disney did, not to mention, it was Disney's first fantasy film not to be a musical. Literally, because as we all know, when it comes to Disney and fairy tales, what's the one big thing that Disney does with their fairy tales? Songs, being musicals. Well, in the case of The Black Cauldron, no. It's the first one, and I think, it seemed to work fine with it not being a musical. Yeah. Black Cauldron being Disney's first fairy tale animated film not to be a musical. Yeah. And again, I think it worked pretty well. Just, yeah. Well, besides, I mean, the next time that Disney would do a fairy tale that would be a musical, after, say, Sleeping Beauty, that was, at the time, their last fairy tale film that was a musical. After that, then come The Little Mermaid. Yep, a couple years after The Black Cauldron. And, of course, with The Little Mermaid, the Disney Renaissance would begin, so, yeah. But, I mean, in between, say, The Black Cauldron and The Little Mermaid, the next couple of films of Disney's that would come out would turn out pretty good, from, say, The Great Mouse Detective, Roger Rabbit, and Oliver and Company. Yeah. Yeah, especially, like, when it came to, say, Roger Rabbit. Oh, yeah, that definitely had everyone be really interested in hand-drawn animation some more. And when next year we would get The Little Mermaid. But anyways, jumping back to The Black Cauldron, because, yeah, it's great to see that, nowadays, and me being one of them, this movie of Disney's, in their library of animated films they've done, it's gotten more love and appreciation, and the lack of how it was received back in 1985, and, even if, like, this movie's not perfect, well, to us, we enjoy it for what it is. We understand, of course, when knowing about the complicated and, crazy history, what went down in the making of The Black Cauldron. But besides all that, it is what it is. Sure, it had bad luck, but for those of us, including me, and maybe the same goes for some of you, we enjoy it for what it is. Okay, but just overall, The Black Cauldron, I really enjoy it. It's a pretty good, decent, fun, entertaining fantasy animated film of Disney's, and yeah, because, as we all know, it's for the entire family, so, yeah, I mean, it would have been, kind of, like, if it had been kept how it would have been originally if it had not been cut down, like, if 12 minutes have not been cut out and all that, I mean, just, yeah, but, alright, I'll talk more about that as I now, because, yeah, again, to finish my first thoughts and such, yeah, The Black Cauldron, really good, I enjoy it, decent, and so on. Okay, now with the first things I've had to say about The Black Cauldron out of the way now, as always for me, read the description / the story. The story centers on Taran, who must protect Henwin, a pig with prophetic, I think I mispronounced it, abilities from the Horned King. The villain wants to use Henwin to find the Black Cauldron, a magical artifact / device that can raise an army of the dead. Taran is joined by Princess Eloini. I know I'm mispronouncing her name, but yeah. And the minstrel Fluter Flam. Yeah. And the creature Gurgi on his quest. Yep. Together they must, stop the Horned King from using the Black Cauldron to raise his army of dead, or else, yeah, chaos and all hell would break loose in their land. So, yeah, and yeah, doom upon them. Alright. So, with reading the description / the story out of the way, let's talk about some background. Yeah, technically I kind of started talking about some background, but yeah, I did stop myself to give my first thoughts. Okay. Well, like I said, I'm sure as we all know, in the late 70s and early 80s, Disney was going through a dark period, and because, yeah, big changes would be on the horizons for Disney, and especially when it came to, say, The Fox and the Hound, the old masters that worked with Uncle Walt himself were retiring, and new faces that I mentioned would step in, and they would be the new animators. Not to mention leadership at Disney was, yeah, complicated and very tough and such, because at that time, Walt's son-in-law, Ron Miller, whom being the husband of one of Walt's daughters, Diane, was in charge of Disney, and Walt's nephew, Roy, also having a big part of Disney, as we all know. But, at a certain point, leadership under Ron Miller was not looking too good. Yeah, especially for Roy's taste. He knew at a certain point that Ron was not making a big success with his father-in-law's company. I mean, who could blame Ron Miller, because he didn't have that same kind of power and all that, those kind of capabilities that his, late father-in-law had. And who can blame him? Because, yeah, there's no way that he can run that company as great as his late father-in-law did. It's just not possible. Because he's no Walt Disney. Walt was Walt, and Ron is Ron. So, yeah. I'm sure, I'd like to think that probably Roy must have known about that too, yeah. And I'm sure that really no bad blood between, say, Roy and Ron. It's just, when it came to business, that was very complicated and not too good. And, as I mentioned, Don Bluth, because at a certain point, Don and a couple of others that were working alongside with him making Banjo, if you know that, they started to realize that the magic of Disney, some of it was gone. It wasn't the same as it once was when Walt was alive. And that's when, on Don's birthday, he and a handful of animators, along with two biggies, John Pomeroy and Gary Goldman, they all resigned at the Disney company, and they went off to start their own animation studio, and we know what would come to them next after that. And because of that, that put a huge damper on the production of The Fox and the Hound, and that's when, new animators had to step in, and from there on. And the release date for The Fox and the Hound was delayed and all that, and that also meant that also affected The Black Cauldron too, because here's the thing. When The Black Cauldron first began, it started all the way back in the early 1970s, and it took them a whole decade to get this movie off ground and so on. And not to mention that, I'm sure as you guys know, The Black Cauldron itself, being based off of the series of novels by the late Lloyd Alexander, The Chronicles of Pryden. Yeah, I said that right. So in the early 1970s, two members of Walt's Nine Old Men, Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson, they had the idea of adapting Lloyd Alexander's series of novels into a movie, and as one whole movie, and they felt that maybe that would be a good success, being a Disney animated film and their next fairy tale. And they managed to convince the Disney company to buy the film rights to Lloyd Alexander's novel series, which they did so, but yeah, it didn't go as expected when, it was a complete development hell for everybody that was committed to bringing Lloyd Alexander's books to life into one whole movie. Basically, select some storylines and all that from each of his books and what would be perfect for the movie, and on account of so many characters, and even when it would come to, say, one character that would be a mixture of a couple of villains from those books into one, and that, of course, being the Horned King. Yeah. And not to mention that Ron Miller, because he wasn't really sure at first and hesitant on the new animators, and even when, say, he brought in someone whom would produce the film to hopefully, get this movie off ground. And, Joe Hale, yes, Joe Hale, would be chosen by Ron Miller to try to get this movie, officially a go and in good progress. And yeah, Joe Hale being one of those many people to bring the story to life. And not to mention, the directors of The Fox and the Hound would be brought back to direct their next Disney animated film, which being this, Ted Berman and Richard Rich. So yeah, after directing The Fox and the Hound, they would step back in the director's chairs for The Black Cauldron. And also, well, yeah, even despite that happening, some good positive things. Well, more troubled situations would come in The Black Cauldron's path when, yeah, after Ron Miller left the company because Roy started the campaign on trying to, kick Ron Miller out, I'm sure you know that, new leadership would step in from, say, Michael Eisner and Frank Wells. And Michael Eisner would bring along with him a friend of his from Paramount, Jeffrey Katzenberg, in charge of the animation. And when Katzenberg stepped in, well, one of his first assignments was, looking over the Black Cauldron, and he was horrified over the final results of The Black Cauldron. And, well, at first, he edited the film himself, trimming out some things. Eventually, he did stop. And that's when they all settled down, and when it came to, say, Roy and Joe Hale and the others, on what stuff to take out that, probably was not necessary, and maybe it would have been too extreme, even for the little kids. Yeah. Yeah, especially because if you are aware of this, one moment where some of the Horned King's guards, his henchmen and such, his army, members of his army, get attacked by the army of the dead. Oh yeah, we'll talk about that very later on, but I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, until we get there. I'm saving that and gonna build that up when we get there. All right. Yeah, but just overall, long story short, about 12 minutes, as I said earlier, 12 minutes of The Black Cauldron had to be cut, which did put a huge damper on the film itself. It hurt the picture, but that's how it was. That's how the film itself turned out in the end. And not to mention that another big disappointment was that Tim Burton, whom once again was involved in Disney's next project after The Fox and the Hound, he was responsible for doing some character designs and sketches on what the film could have looked like. And, well, yeah, the various concept art pics that Tim Burton did and sketched, designed, well, this project would have been a perfect fit for Burton, but they were all rejected. Not to mention that Burton would be fired / let go from Disney after, say, Frankenweenie. And to think that Disney said that, his Frankenweenie short film was scary, well, look who's talking, because look how The Black Cauldron turned out. Even, with 12 minutes cut out, it still terrified little kids and all that. Just... Oh, well, it is what it is. Anyways, but yeah, it's unfortunate that Tim Burton, his concept art and such was rejected. On the bright side, they managed to convince one of the other members of Walt's 9 Old Men, Milt Kahl, to come out of retirement and do the character designs and to give it that classic touch and all that, especially since they were trying to go in the direction and style of, say, Sleeping Beauty. Yeah. Also, not to mention that, another well-known man in the industry of animation, Ralph Bakshi, was once considered, at one point considered, I should say, to be involved in The Black Cauldron, especially after, when it came to, say, two of his fantasy animated films, which were very light and they weren't R-rated and such as his early films. I'm, of course, talking about The Wizards and the first movie adaptation of The Lord of the Rings. After those two did pretty well, yeah, it's no surprise that, Disney approached him to be involved in this. He too would have been a perfect fit for this. But Bakshi, I understand, because, yeah, he felt that, his involvement in a Disney film and with him doing animation would be too mature. I understand his opinion and his point, and yeah, but who knows? Like maybe it would have turned out okay, and maybe Ralph could have done his best saving the picture, but still, like I said, in the later years, Black Cauldron, it did grow more appreciation and the love it needed. Just, yeah. All right, anyways, but, yeah. And just overall, because when the Black Cauldron itself came out in theaters, yep, it was a huge disappointment. Not to mention that, I'm sure you guys are well aware of this, the Black Cauldron at the box office lost to the Care Bears film. That was definitely an embarrassing moment for Disney. And to think that the Care Bears, basically that movie just being made for, toy products and all that, it's hard to believe that happened to Disney. Well, and the fact that, the Care Bears, it came out, 4 months before, say, the Black Cauldron, so, well, that's just how it turned out. Care Bears beated Black Cauldron. It gave them the boot at the box office. They were making all the money and such. And it was the top best animated film of that year. So, because, not Black Cauldron, unfortunately. Another thing is that, I just feel like mentioning this because, Black Cauldron, not being the only fantasy film that did very poorly, because even, say, Ridley Scott's Legend didn't do that great either, which, of course, I reviewed that. I've reviewed that as well, Ridley Scott's Legend, if you want to go check it out. But just, that's a fact, because it's hard to believe that same year, 2 fantasy films, one animated and one live action, they did poorly. Man, I guess 1985 was not a pleasant and satisfying year for some fantasy films, in the case of those 2. Oh, well. Oh, and one more thing I almost forgot to mention. The Black Cauldron is, in fact, the first Disney animated film to use 2 things. One, animation photo transfer process. And maybe some of you know this. Well, basically, it involves photographing an animator's drawing into a transparent sheet called a cell, which can be then layered over backgrounds to add color and create a final animated scene. So, various parts of the Black Cauldron, like when it came to, like, say, the magical stuff that's in the air, or the boat, the river, all that, just, And 2, the use of computer animation. Yep, because, what I can most prominently think of is, say, a close-up headshot of the Horned King, the back of his head, that being one of them, or, say, the boat in the film, and amongst other things. And, a lot of people say that The Great Mouse Detective was the first Disney animated film to use CG, because, most prominently, the clock gears and Big Ben. Well, I mean, that's, of course, have to acknowledge, that was groundbreaking that came from The Great Mouse Detective, but nope. The Black Cauldron was indeed the first Disney animated film to use CG. Try to keep that in mind. But just overall, because it's interesting knowing about the history and facts that I've shared about the Black Cauldron. But again, despite all that, it's great that, as of now, it's gotten more love and appreciation. And I'm probably going to say that again towards the end of my review, but just, Okay. Now, with talking about some background and such, now out of the way, well, let us now dive in / break down the Black Cauldron itself. Okay, first off, have to acknowledge that with the opening logo of Disney, the Black Cauldron is, in fact, the first Disney film, period, to have an official logo of Disney and such. Because, before the Black Cauldron, the other past Disney films, even up to, say, starting with Snow White and then up to, say, The Fox and the Hound, never really had an official logo of the Disney company, but until thanks to the Black Cauldron. And with what's on my shirt, of course, and that classic fanfare, just, da-na-na-na-na. I noticed this because, after the Black Cauldron, a bit of the music to it was a bit different and such, because, I don't know, maybe you guys understand what I'm saying and realize this too, because the way the music sounds, it's the same way it is, but just, it's more grand and such, you know? I'm just saying, like, if you get what I'm trying to say, just, yeah, maybe you've noticed it too. Alright. But yeah, it's great to see that, yeah, the Black Cauldron marking the first time that Disney has its official logo, and yeah. And I'm sure for a lot of us, we favor this. Like, no hard feelings on the later logos of Disney that would come after. Just, yeah, definitely can never top off this one specifically. Yeah. Okay, so, after that, well, we get a little bit of narration about, you know, the mystic land of Pryden, and with the mentioning and a little descriptions of the Black Cauldron and, well, the gods fearing of someone whom is after the cauldron, which of course being the Horned King, and just, yeah. So the Horned King just overall, you know, determined to get his hands on the cauldron and have the cauldron do his evil doing, just, yeah. And, well, then with our title of the film showing, then we cut to our first cast of characters. We have Dalbin, whom, of course, knows about the Horned King and is, you know, worried about what the Horned King is going to do, and so on. And we have our other character, whom is the main character of this film, Taran, whom is basically someone whom is looking after a pig. You know, he's an assistant to Dalbin, watching over a pig. And little does Taran know at first that this pig that Taran is watching over, helping out Dalbin watch over, named Henwin, there's something about Henwin that's very special. Yeah, Taran will find out soon. And Tarwin being voiced by Grant Bardsley. Yeah, if I'm mispronouncing his last name, but again, you know me sometimes. Well, he's, by this point, he's sick and tired of just being an assistant, watching over and looking after Henwin. He wants to be a warrior and get out there and do some fighting and such, be a knight. Dalbin knows that, you know, Taran is not quite ready, capable of being a warrior and such. Yeah, and say what you will about Taran, like, acting like a wimp and all that, like a baby, just, you know, wanting to be a warrior. Like, I mean, even when I did my rewatch, I understand, but it didn't really bother me. Just, you know, haven't we all had those moments sometimes, even if we've not overdone it? Yeah, like what Taran does at times. But yeah, but at the same time, like Taran, I mean, he, you know, of course he loves and cares for Henwin. Well, I mean, you know, Taran just a couple of times just, you know, pretending and acting like a warrior and such, even when he scares Henwin and a couple of ducks, and having a goat pretend to be the Horned King and such, and Taran claiming that he's not afraid and could stand up against the Horned King. Well, not exactly, at least not yet. And then, well, at one point, because something triggers Henwin. Well, it wasn't because of Taran, but something is spooking Henwin, and Dalbin would then start to realize what's going on with Henwin, and would have Taran bring Henwin inside, and that's when Dalbin would reveal to Taran that Henwin has the capability to see in the future. And, well, basically, Henwin can see, and with a special bowl of liquid and all that, what they can see in that liquid is that, yeah, eventually, and very soon, the Horned King will get his hands on the Black Cauldron. And apparently, it's also discovered by Dalbin and Taran that Henwin knows specifically where the Black Cauldron is located. And this would, like, managed to alert the Horned King, and Dalbin just getting Taran to very quickly, like, dispose of Henwin to get Henwin out of there, etc. And yeah, this would lead to when Dalbin would tell Taran to leave with Henwin to go into the Forbidden Forest to seek shelter and to avoid being caught by the Horned King, because yeah, knowing by this point, the Horn King may very well, and if he fully knows, yeah, he will go after and bring in the pig. And yeah, Dalbin, almost forgot to mention him. Dalbin being voiced by Freddie Jones. And Dalbin, I mean, he was a pretty good character. Even though we don't get that much of him, he was harmless and such, a wise character. And, he treated Tarwin very well, even when Taran would get into some mischievous stuff, not really intentionally of Taran, but still, And Taran, because, I mean, say what you will, if you don't like Taran, you're entitled to your opinion, but I don't really view Taran as really a bad character. He's young and naive, but, eventually he would, of course, develop, and as his journey would proceed, as it starts with him, leaving and traveling alongside with Henlin. Yeah. Okay, then let's come to the Horned King himself, because at his scary castle, well, we get our introduction of the main antagonist himself, the main villain of this movie. Not to mention that the Horned King's music, whenever the Horned King pops up, and whenever he makes a dramatic entrance or does anything, oh man, the music that accompanies with whatever the Horned King does is so fantastic. And of course, have to acknowledge the late legendary composer of music, Elmore Bernstein, whom 1 year before doing The Black Cauldron, he most famously did the music and score for the first Ghostbusters film. But he's done more than that, of course. Yeah, he's definitely right up there next to, say, other great talents who write music for movies. John Williams, Jerry Goldsmith, Danny Elfman, the list goes on. Yeah, he's definitely right up there. His music and score that he brought to Disney's The Black Cauldron is so underrated, so fantastic, especially, like I said, whenever the Horned King pops in. Oh yeah, the music that accompanies the Horned King for whatever happens is so fantastic. Even to mention Doug Walker, aka the Nostalgia Critic, he feels that, I don't know, he feels that, it sounds very similar to the music that Bernstein did in Ghostbusters. Well, I mean, yeah, it is. They were both done by Bernstein, so yeah, there are some similarities, and, with the type of music that Bernstein did for dramatic moments, yeah. But again, for me, I can kind of tell, and I would think so too, that, yeah, because again, it's Bernstein, so yeah, no argument there. But yeah, and of course, can't forget to acknowledge and mention the voice of the Horned King himself, the late, legendary John Hurt. Yes. Well, what can you say about John Hurt as the voice of the Horned King? Is it me, or is the Horned King, one of those characters in the Black Cauldron that's a great character, standalone good character to come from this, if you know what I'm saying? I feel that way, I'm sure you do too. And the Horned King, a very underrated Disney villain, but, like any other Disney villain, in the case of the Horned King, he's very menacing, and with what he's wanting to do in the Black Cauldron, with what evil he's doing, raising an army of the dead with the use of the Black Cauldron, and unleashing doom on the land and all that, of course that's evil, so yeah. And the way John Hurt sounds and voices as the Horned King, well, obviously he's doing his natural voice, but there's an echo effect, kind of, that really goes well with John Hurt's voice performance as the Horned King. I love that. Also, to mention the prologue narrator being voiced by John Huston. John Huston, that's right, yeah. Huston, yeah. But yeah, but just overall, our first introduction to the Horned King, because, the speech he gives, his attempt to raise the army of the dead, and, oh yes, then you will worship me! Oh, it's so amazing. Yeah, our first taste of the Horned King, and that we of course know, and even as the movie started off, informing us that the Horned King is very evil and menacing, Okay, But coming back to Taran and Henwin, because, yeah, well, Tarwin and Henwin proceeding on their journey, but Tarwin's still going on and off about wanting to be a warrior and such, even when at one point he distracts himself, looking at his own reflection in a pool of water, and viewing himself as a great knight, and, thank you, holding a stick, pretending it to be a sword. And because he got distracted, well, he lost Henwin. Yeah, Henwin got away from him, and and he was supposed to keep an eye on Henwin. Yeah, so he's trying to search for Henwin, and when he thinks Henwin's nearby, trying to get Henwin to come up to him by, whipping out an apple, well, it's not Henwin, it's Gurgi. Yes, Gurgi. Enter Gurgi, being voiced by John Byner. Yeah. Now, say what you will about Gurgi, because I'm sure for any of you, you either dislike him or like him, and for those of you that dislike him, well, you find him so annoying. Now, I don't know if you'd find him annoying as, say, up to the level of, say, what, Jar Jar Binks? I don't know. I think that's going too far. Because, Gurgi's, he's harmless. Yeah, because he too is mischievous and, trying to nab after food and all that, and being like a little thief and such, but eventually, of course, like Taran, Gurgi especially would adapt and develop as the journey proceeds. And even Gurgi already viewing Taran as a friend of his, but Taran not so much. Just not viewing Gurgi as a friend, just as a little thief and being so mischievous and such. And, if any of you feel that Gurgi's voice is annoying, well, you're entitled to your opinion, but for me, not really. And, because the way Gurgi's voice sounds and the voice performance that John Byner delivered, well, very close to, say, what Gollum is, I guess. And the way Gurgi talks, in that same territory as what Dobby does, because Gurgi this and Gurgi that, because Gurgi say we go this way, my Gurgi impression. Oh, poor miserable Gurgi. Yeah. So, in that kind of talk, where he says his name, just like what Dobby does, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Dobby the house elf. All right. Even if I don't say house elf, you know who I'm still talking about, Dobby. Just when I say the name Dobby. Okay, moving on. Well, because Gurgi, he would eventually hand over the apple, even after taking a bite of it, still be mischievous. And, well, Taran asks Gurgi at one point if maybe he had seen the pig Henwin. Gurgi, claiming that he has not seen the pig, and, well, Taran just walking away and kind of, showing off the apple, if Gurgi wants the apple, then, he'll talk, which he does so. So, yeah, he then gives in and tells Taran that he did see Henwin pass by, and, yeah, then eventually, well, they both would hear the wailing screams of Henwin when, at one point, Henwin is being chased after by a couple of creatures under the Horned King's command, the Gathanes, if I pronounce that name right, yeah. This two-headed dragon that's going after Henwin, and that dragon-like creature it's voiced by Pat Fraley, yeah. And to mention some of the other voice cast members, those who are uncredited, Greg Berger voices Talion, if I even pronounce that right. The frogs that are in the Black Cauldron were voiced by Mel Blanc. That's really cool. Candy Candido, who did a lot of voice work for Disney. He voiced some of the Horned King's guards. And Brian Harvey, he voiced one of the fair folks, and we'll get to the fair folks soon. And Bob Holt, he did the sounds for the rats, and apparently John Lasseter, he did some of the wolf sounds. I think probably when, say, one of the wolves, kind of whimpered or something, maybe, but that's interesting, yeah. Anyways, all right, but back on point, because, with the two-headed dragon, and that's what I'll refer to it as, is chasing after Henwin. Well, Taran trying to catch up to and try to save Henwin, but yeah, unfortunately, they snatch Henwin, and yeah, just no luck there. Actually, because, like, I keep thinking, like, they are two-headed dragons, but no, they're not. They're two separate dragons. My bad, so yeah. Anyways, so yeah, because one of them snatches Henwin, and one of them pinned down Taran on the dirty ground, just, yeah, the mud and such, just, you know, bug off, just, you know. So, now Henwin's been captured, and, well, I mean, Taran, he promised Dalbin that he would, you know, keep watch on Henwin, but when he got distracted, just, yeah, I mean, it was really nothing intentional of Taran. I can sense that, but, you know. And, well, Taran, well, he's got to go and save Henwin, get Henwin out of that castle of the Horned Kings. Gurgi, whom would show up again, you know, he finds it being a bad idea for Taran to go in because it's a very scary place. Yeah, and obviously Gurgi is well aware of whom the Horned King is. And Taran, well, just, yeah, setting Gurgi straight that, you know, he's a coward and no friend and all that. But yeah, even when Taran, he asked Gurgi if he, you know, if he would tag along with him, you know, accompany him, but, you know, Gurgi just, his cowardness would step in, just, yeah, so Taran, he would go off on his own, taking quite the big risk, even when he thinks that he can stand up to the Horned King. Not quite, yeah. So, with Taran making his way into the Horned King's castle, sneaking around even when he would almost be exposed when one of the wolves/dogs would spot him, but, you know, one of the Horned King's guards makes nothing of it and thinks that, well, that wolf/dog is barking at nothing, so, yeah. So he didn't spot Taran as well. And we see the rest of the Horned King's soldiers, you know, they're celebrating on account of the capture of Henwin, and we see the Horned King's henchman/sidekick, whom, like any of the other Disney villain henchmen/sidekicks, is goofy and all that, and would get abused by the main villain himself or herself. Yeah, the Horned King's sidekick/henchman, Creeper, being voiced by Phil Fondecaro, if I got his last name right or wrong, but yeah. And he also voiced another henchman of the Horned Kings, yeah. And some of the other henchmen of the Horned King, yeah, that's what they're referred as. But they're also, you know, his soldiers, technically, you know, his men. The other henchmen being voiced by Peter Renaday. Oh, yes, Peter Renaday. Peter Renaday, whom probably be best known as the original voice of Henry the Bear from Country Bears. But also, I'm sure you guys, most of you know, he was one of the original voices of Splinter from Ninja Turtles. Yep, that's him. But before Splinter, he was best known as the voice of Henry, the host of Country Bears. Yep, that's him. And amongst other voice roles he did for Disney and for other pieces of animation. But yeah, so yeah, Peter Renaday, and the other henchman voices, James Almanzar, yeah, and one of the voices of Mickey Mouse himself, the late Wayne Allwyn, Steve Hale, Phil Nibelink, Nibelink, I might be mispronouncing his last name some, but again, you know me sometimes. And finally, Jack Lang. Yeah, so all of them voice many of the henchmen of the Horned Kings. So again, they're celebrating on account of the capture of Henwin. We see a gypsy girl performing, one of the henchmen like going in for a kiss, but yeah. The celebration would be interrupted when the Horned King makes his dramatic entrance. You know, even one of the wolves and dogs can't help but be intimidated by the sense and presence of the Horned King. Oh yeah, that wolf and dog, well, on account of all the others roaming around the castle, knowing the power and abilities of the Horned King, just, yeah, being very intimidating. So yeah, the Horned King stepping in and technically joining in the fun. He sits in his throne, Creeper serving a drink for him, and, you know, poor Creeper, because a good chunk of times where the Creeper would get strangled by the throat, by the neck. Well, again, you know, those Disney villains and how they treat and abuse their sidekicks, from, say, Prince John, Sir Hiss, Alameda Slim, the Willy brothers, and sometimes Captain Hook and Smee. Well, I mean, yeah, sometimes Captain Hook is okay towards Smee sometimes, or, say, Honest John towards Gideon at times. Just, in that category of villains and sidekicks where the villains are sometimes harsh on their sidekicks, Anyways. So, by bringing in Hen Wen, well, they try to get Hen Wen to put her face in, the bowl of liquid to do her stuff, to see in the future on where the Black Cauldron is, but Hen Wen is refusing to do so, and they're almost about to torture Hen Wen, burn her and such. But Taran, well, he steps in, he exposes himself, revealing his presence, and when they would discover that, Taran is, one of those that's looking after the pig, is the pig keeper and such, one of them, but he's the assistant of looking after the pig. The Horn King orders Taran to get Hen Wen to show the Horn King where the Black Cauldron is, but Taran is refusing to do so. Because of this, they hold Taran back, and, they're going to execute Hen Wen. Decapitate her and such, But Taran, he gives in. He doesn't want to see Hen Wen die, because, of course, with, how much he cares about Hen Wen, and Hen Wen being his responsibility, he doesn't want that to happen, so he gives in and has Hen Wen show the Horn King and everybody else where the Black Cauldron could be. And, that worked on Taran. So, even the Horn King knew that if by doing that, executing, decapitating Hen Wen, that would get Taran to cooperate and such, which he does so. It works. And then the Horn King starts to approach Taran and Hen Wen, show me. And this terrifies Taran, and he grabs Hen Wen, the bowl of liquid, it pours on the Horn King's face, it burns him. It had some, very toxic chemicals to it, I guess. Yeah. And, a chase pursues where those two dragons, they try to chase after Taran and Hen Wen, and the same goes for the Horn King's henchmen. But unfortunately, they're not able to catch them in time when they make their way outside of the castle, over the edge of the castle, on one of the rooftops, and, Taran would push Hen Wen off to the side, off to the side of the castle, and telling Hen Wen to swim by falling down into the river, go to shore, and find cover. Taran was gonna jump, but unfortunately, he's captured by Creeper and all the others. So, now he's taken in hostage, the Horn King ordering them to throw him in the dungeon, which they do so. And Taran, he, I'm saying Tarwin, I'm Taran. It's Taran, Luckily, now I know fully how to say his name, so, Alright, but as I was saying, Taran, now in the dungeon, and a moment to himself where he feels guilty, failing his mission/task to protect Hen Wen at all costs, Dalbin putting Taran under, in charge, Hen Wen being Taran's responsibility, and he failed at that. Well, not exactly, because in the end, he managed to, get Hen Wen out of there. And even when that led to him being captured and such, So hopefully, Hen Wen is safe and sound for now. Hopefully, if any of the Horn King's henchmen or those two dragons would have gone after and managed to locate and once again bring in Hen Wen. Luckily, that doesn't happen. The next time Taran would reunite with Hen Wen, because where Hen Wen would end up next, and since I already mentioned them, Hen Wen would find himself in good care with the fair folks. But until I talk about the fair folks when we get there, okay. Well, at one point, when hope seems completely lost for Tarwin, someone actually steps in the dungeon cell that Taran is in. A princess by the name of Elanawi. I hope I'm this time saying it right, but Elanawi, whom is a princess, and definitely she's a very underrated princess for sure. I'd say probably she's up there next to, say, some of the other biggies, like Princess Kida from Atlantis, or Princess Ada from A Bug's Life. Oh yeah, definitely. They don't get that much love and appreciation as, like, the other big-time Disney princesses, but no hard feelings on them. No hard feelings on them. They're all great, but yeah. But I think for a lot of us, yeah, we definitely show a lot more love and appreciation for, say, Kida and Ada. And if any of us do the same for Elwani. So yeah, Elwani, yeah, I think so. Okay. And the princess herself being voiced by Susan Sheridan. Yeah. So she steps in, along with her little magic ball of light that steps in. Basically, this, like, magic ball of light is, I mean, it is a character technically, but, yeah, there's really not that much of this one, because, yeah, it's basically, a golden Cauldron, if I said that right, yeah. It's a small glowing light blue orb that acts as a guide and companion to the princess and such. Yeah, light blue orb. Well, I mean, it's gold, so yeah. Anyways, but yeah, couldn't forget to mention that character. So yeah. And, you know, whenever needed, like, does help out our main group of characters at times. Yeah, so that's right. Again, the Golden Cauldron. I hope I'm saying that right, but just, yeah. Again, couldn't forget to mention that character. Okay, but getting back on point, because, yeah, the two of them would stumble upon and cross paths with Taran, and they help him out for him to escape. They have him tag along with them, and yeah, because, you know, like Taran, both of them are also being held captive by the Horn King himself. But yeah, somehow the princess and the magic ball of light, they managed to, you know, find a way to escape their dungeon cell and make their way through the castle. So they would do so, and now with Taran tagging along with them. And at one point, they would stumble upon someone else who's being held captive by the Horn King. Someone who is a musician and plays the harp. And even though his harp has a personality of its own, every time he tells a lie, the strings would break. You know, it's very similar to, like, say, in the case of Pinocchio, when, as we all know, when Pinocchio tells a lie, his nose grows. So in the case of this guy, his harp would break off strings when he tells a lie. And the harp musicianer being named Fluter Flam. And, you know, Fluter Flam was another pretty good, funny character in the Black Cauldron. Yeah, technically, like, being like another comic relief and such for the film. And when he would join alongside with the two other characters, the princess and Taran. But I like him. He's a pretty good character, harmless and such, and he has some good moments later on in the film, but until we get to those, of course. And Fluter Flam being voiced by the late Nigel Hawthorne. Yeah, I think I got his last name right. Yeah. And by the way, Nigel Hawthorne, just one decade... Yeah, I got his last name right. Nigel Hawthorne. As I was saying, one decade after doing a Disney animated film, which being this, he would find himself being a part of another Disney animated film in the late Disney Renaissance in Tarzan, voicing Jane's father, Professor Porter. Yes, that's him. That's really cool when you realize that, because, yeah... when you, like, whenever, like, if you first see Tarzan or first see Black Cauldron, and then when you later start to realize that, wow, it's the same guy who voiced Fluter Flam and voicing Professor Porter. That's really cool. But that was great to see that Nigel Hawthorne was given another voice role in another Disney animated film, and in a good one. Because, yeah, I mean, Tarzan being really good than, say, the Black Cauldron, but again, you know, and with no hard feelings on the Black Cauldron, as I said, just, yeah. And, you know, to quickly mention this, I like it when, yeah, because when Disney did this, that some actors in their later years would come back and have a big voice role in a Disney animated film. Because, yeah, in the case of Nigel Hawthorne, that of course being Tarzan as Professor Porter, or say, as I mentioned earlier, Candy Candido, because he'd done so many voice work for Disney, and in his later years, and in the 1980s, he would find himself doing a big voice role in The Great Mouse Detective, Professor Ratigan's bat sidekick Fidget. And yeah, that also goes for Professor Ratigan and Fidget. How did I not think of them? Because, yeah, Professor Ratigan and Fidget being in that same category, too, where the villain is very harsh at times to his sidekick. Yeah, his or her sidekick. But as I was saying, because, yeah, as mentioned, Candy Candido, and also, Ben Wright. Yeah, that's right, Ben Wright, whom had voiced Roger from 101 Dalmatians, and would then voice, say, Mowgli's adoptive wolf father in The Jungle Book. Well, in his later years, and before he would pass away, he would find himself having another big voice role in The Little Mermaid as Grimsby. Yep, that's him. So, overall, and my point being is that, yeah, I liked it when Disney had done that, you know, bring in some actors, actresses, like, and up to their later years, and they would find themselves doing a pretty good big voice role and such, and even before, say, any of them would then a little later pass away. You get what I'm saying? Just, yeah, I love that. Okay, but getting back on point and to speed things up some, because, yeah, Fluter Flam, whom is also being held hostage and as a prisoner of the Horn King, well, I mean, he's trying to negotiate with one of the Horn King's henchmen, trying to find a way to be set free. He means good business, and being a musician and such, he's just a simple musician playing a harp and all that, even when he tries to make peace with one of the dogs/wolves, but yeah, that doesn't work either. Even when he notices another musician who had been held prisoner and he unfortunately died, just, yeah. And, well, hopefully Fluter doesn't have to share that same fate as that other musician. But yeah, luckily he doesn't when, yeah, the princess and Taran, they step in to try to help Fluter, but unfortunately, it's cut short when the other henchmen start to realize, and they discover that Taran escaped from his dungeon cell. They refer to him as the pig boy, so yeah, pig keeper and all that. So then, yeah, they try to find and pursue Taran, and, well, Taran and the princess, they have to take cover and hide, avoid the henchmen, and, yeah, unfortunately, they leave Fluter behind, even when, yeah, Fluter, he encouraged them to get out of there, leave and such. But, yeah, even say at one point, and the more they, you know, go through the castle, even say when they see at one point, Creeper and a few of the henchmen bringing in more skeletons of past warriors. So, yeah, building up the Horn King's army of the dead, basically. Yeah. Then at one point discovering that this castle once belonged to a great king, and before the Horn King stepped in and claimed the castle to himself. And even Taran, he at one point discovers the great king having this very powerful sword, and with Taran wielding it, well, it works for him, and, well, one step ahead for Taran. Because when he thinks that maybe it's one step ahead of him becoming a warrior and such. And the sword, again, does come in handy when, yeah, he does come across a few of the henchmen. The sword does its duty, / its work, to take on the henchmen, and when they discover that, yeah, the sword is powerful and they're no match for this sword, yeah, they run away and such. A few of them run away, and even when the princess discovers this too. But yeah, overall, their attempts to escape the Horn King's castle, and with the sword coming in handy, yeah, they're making good progress, and as they proceed, you know, further through the castle, up to when they're, say, outside of the Horn King's castle, and with everybody on their tail, and the Creeper, of course, and even Fluter Flam. He managed to escape, but yeah, he's being chased by one of the dogs. But yeah, still, all three of them, they managed to escape, close the gates, coming down, and yeah, luckily Fluter managed to escape from the dog when it grabbed him by the pants, and just, yeah. So all three of them, in the end, escaped the castle. Yep. And, well, the Creeper, taking it upon himself to deliver the news to his master, the Horned King, that Taran escaped. And, well, the Creeper is taking quite the risk for himself because he knows that by delivering this news, it's going to piss off the Horned King, and that would lead to the Horned King, you know, strangling him by the neck. And when the Creeper, you know, being the bravest he can to deliver this information to the Horned King, well, the Horned King telling him to come over here, but Creeper just like, no, allow me, sire. That's what he does. I mean, yeah. However, the Horned King, he manages to handle this very well, because with Taran having escaped his castle, that means that Taran will make his way and reuniting with the pig, and which that'll mean that they'll manage to locate and find them once again and bring in the pig once again. Just, yeah. And from there on, like, yeah, the attempts to try to locate the Black Cauldron. But coming back to Taran, the princess, and Fluter, because, yeah, now that all three of them are together, well, at one point, things get a bit out of hand between Taran and the princess, especially because, like, the princess feeling that maybe Taran not really having the full capability to handle himself and all that, and just, yeah, that bit of conversation they get into, and, like, they're both mad at one another, and Fluter, he was trying to make peace between each of them, that they gotta stick together. Like, if they do this, they split, like, yeah, then there's no hope, and they're no match towards the others if they're not together. Which it wouldn't take too long for them to, you know, patch things up and realize that, yeah, Fluter Flam was right. Yeah, it's true. But then, of course, at one point they hear Fluter screaming, because, yeah, Gurgi steps back in. He was trying to go after Fluter's hat and his harp, and Taran stepping in, confronting Gurgi, you know, once again, Gurgi being a thief and all that, and not still being a friend. Yeah, but eventually Gurgi would give in and then join our trio characters. And this time, for sure, knowing and finding the directions where Henwin went to. Because, yeah, Gurgi would then spot pig tracks on the ground. And obviously those come from Henwin. And if anything, yeah, Henwin would be the only pig out in the forest. Yeah. So, they follow the trail, only up to when, say, they find themselves where there's a river and a whirlpool happens. They go down this whirlpool, they're unconscious for a few minutes, and that's when they would come face-to-face / cross paths with, yes, the fair folks. Yep, now enter the fair folks, as I mentioned earlier. And the fair folks, because, yeah, I mentioned one of them whom voices one of the fair folks, but the other fair folks being voiced by a couple of kid voice actors, yeah. Lindsay Rich, Brandon Call, Gregory Levinson, and two of the main fair folks, King Edeleg, if I even got that name right. Maybe I butchered it, but again, you know me sometimes. And man, like, sometimes it's complicated with names and words and anything fantasy, right? Just, yeah. And in the case of the Black Cauldron. But yeah, but the king, being voiced by another good talent in this movie, the late Arthur Mallet, whom had worked with Disney before. He was in Mary Poppins as, you know, he was the son of the owner of the bank and such that Mr. Banks worked at. Yeah, that was him. I'm blanking on the name, but yeah, Mr. Dawes. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, good thing because I was pulling it up. Mr. Dawes. He was Mr. Dawes Jr., but the later films that he would be in and he would be best known for, well, he would be the graveyard keeper in the first Halloween film, the true definitive Halloween film, of course. Yeah. He was also Mr. Ages, if I got the name right, from The Secret of Nim. Yeah, that being another big animated film for him. But also, in 1991, in Steven Spielberg's Hook, Toodles. Yep, Toodles, of course, that being another biggie for him. So yeah, I don't know why, because, like, I didn't recognize his voice in this, because he's got such a recognizable voice, but I don't know, just one of those things, but yeah. But it's really cool, because, you know, him having worked with Disney before, most prominently in Mary Poppins, and to be a part of one of the Disney animated films, good for him, yeah. And fun fact, before Arthur Mallet stepped in, Jonathan Winters was originally considered and was announced at one point to be the voice of the king of the Fair Folks, but unfortunately that didn't come to be, and thus Arthur Mallet stepped in the picture, which, you know, in the end, Arthur Mallet did pretty good. And the other big member of the Fair Folks, alongside with the king, and who was responsible for that whirlpool, and has made some contraptions and such for the Fair Folks, Dolly. Yeah, that's his name, Dolly. Also being voiced by Gurgi himself, John Byner. So yeah, good for John Byner voicing two big characters in this film. Yeah, Gurgi and Dolly. And man, because the two voice performances he delivers to those, like, yeah, you wouldn't realize at first that it's the same guy. Yeah. But the King and Dolly, they too were some pretty good characters, sidekicks and all that, you know, for the Black Cauldron. Yeah, I mean, Dolly kind of having a grumpy attitude at times, but the King, he's very friendly, even towards the visitors, you know, Taran, the princess, Fluter, and Gurgi. So yeah. And yeah, as mentioned earlier, it turns out that, and when Taran mentions to the king and the other fair folks about a pig, they know whom, Taran's talking about. And thus, yeah, Henwin stepping in, and it's a nice reunion between Taran and Henwin. So yeah, again, as mentioned earlier, Henwin would cross paths with the fair folks and be in good care with the fair folks. And yeah, obviously the fair folks, they're well aware of the Horned King, and also on account of the Black Cauldron. And it turns out that Dolly happens to know where the Black Cauldron is, and maybe they can get to the Black Cauldron before the Horned King himself does. And apparently, the king believes that where it's located, and with Dolly knowing, it's somewhere in Morva. Yeah, the Black Cauldron being located in Morva. So, ultimately, what would happen next is that Dolly would tag along with Taran, the princess, and Flam, and Gurgi, leading them to Morva, to wherever the Black Cauldron is in Morva. So that's what happens. And as for Henwin, well, Henwin will return back to where, he belongs, once again reuniting with Dalbin. So, yeah, the king will see to that Henwin will return to Dalbin, and yeah, good thing that for Henwin, he'll be, she'll be in safe hands, and away from being in the Horn King's territory and not being harmed. So yeah, and that's it on Henwin, basically. Henwin finished her duty and all that, Anyways, so now that Henwin is safe and sound, and now they proceed on their journey, so they would make their way to Morva, and when they would discover that, it's somewhere here in Morva, but that is until, say, something emerges from the ground. Yeah, because there's more than just, say, one cauldron. There's a massive full of cauldrons and this cottage and such, and when they step foot, well, it turns out that this cottage, and with all of these cauldrons, it's basically the property of this part of Morva. These witches, they discover these 3 witches, the witches of Morva, whom have these collection of cauldrons, and one of them, of course, being the Black Cauldron. Not to mention, there are these frogs, and because I mentioned the frogs early, being voiced by Mel Blanc. Well, they discovered some frogs, and they let them loose. Turns out those frogs were actually humans. The witches turned them into frogs, but now this time, thanks to Taran and the others, they let those frogs free. And when the witches would step in, yeah, our 3 witches of Morva, the names being Ordu, Orwin, and Orgok. Yeah, I hope I know I got Orwin right, but I think for Ordu and Orok, I think, yeah, I got their names right. Especially, yeah, in the case of Orwin, she's a chubby witch. She has an attraction for poor Fluter Flam. And what the witches are best known for in this movie is that they are quite good for making bargains/trades. And because Taran and the others, they want the Black Cauldron, well, what the witches want in return, by handing over them the Black Cauldron, they want, they want the sword, or even, say, wanting Fluter Flam. Like, they want to cook Fluter Flam up for stew, like turning him into a frog and making frog stew, frog soup and such. But in the case of Orwin, no, she doesn't want any harm on Fluter Flam, and since, yeah, she's now quickly fallen in love with Fluter Flam. And the 3 witches, Ordu being voiced by Edda Reese Murren, Orwin being voiced by Adele Malice Mori, yeah, and Orgok, yeah, being voiced by Billy Hayes, and whom, by the way, Billy Hayes would be best known for being Witchy Pooh in H.R. Pufnstuf, and another animated film that she would be a part of in her later years was Shrek Forever After, voicing a cackling witch. So, yeah, that's what I saw on her IMDb page known for. So, yeah, but most prominently, Witchy Pooh in H.R. Pufnstuf. And if any of you have seen and are familiar with H.R. Pufnstuf, how can you not be? All right, anyways. Yeah, so, yeah, and to talk more about the 3 witches, and before I get back on point, because, yeah, I mean, the 3 witches, they too were some pretty interesting characters, and they were quite funny. And to say more about Orwin and her attraction towards Fluter Flam, and even when, say, he turns into a frog and Orwin tries to help out Fluter Flam in his situation, even when, say, geez, because, well, this was Disney back then, and surely because they wouldn't do something like this again, but yeah. When Fluter Flam as the frog is, stuck in between, Orwin's boobs, you know, of course. You've seen the movie, so yeah. Oh, well, that's Disney back then for you. Anyways, in a funny way, and just nothing too extreme, but just, yeah, when they did do that stuff, okay. Adult jokes and certain things, you get my point. Okay, but back on point. So again, and to still speed things up some, the whole thing between Taran and the others making a deal/trade/bargain with the witches, in exchange for the Black Cauldron itself, well, in the end, Taran would sacrifice the sword he wielded back at the Horn King's castle to the witches. And thus, yeah, the Black Cauldron would be given to them. Their whole cottage and everything inside of their cottage would disappear, with the exception, of course, of the Black Cauldron itself. And it turns out that what they now discovered with the Black Cauldron is not what they expected. That apparently the only way to destroy the Black Cauldron, to take it down once and for all, is someone has to basically go inside of the cauldron and make the ultimate sacrifice. Yeah. And that way, because the Horn King cannot, do his evil doing using the Black Cauldron. But, yeah. Well, ultimately, and after the witches, they disembark for now, the bargain didn't really go as expected on account of what they specifically said on account of the Black Cauldron. Yeah. Well, sure enough, the 2 dragons and all of the Horn King's henchmen would step in, get the Black Cauldron themselves, and bring in our our main trio. Gurgi actually, once again, acting as a coward, he ran off. Right before that, because they didn't know what to do next. And, well, luckily for Dolly, because he had enough, and he disembarked. He ditched them and such. So luckily, he got out of there right before the bad guy stepped in. And the same goes for Gurgi. And because, again, he acted cowardlessly, but, eventually, and when it would come to our trio being held hostage by the Horn King once again, Gurgi would step back, and he would actually be very brave and take the encouragement to try and rescue his friends. But yeah, by this point, the Horn King now has the Black Cauldron in his hands, and thus taking one of his army of the dead, one of the skeletons, putting it inside of the cauldron, and great delivery of lines from John Hurt as the Horn King. "Arise, my messengers of death, our time has arrived." That close-up shot of his face, that's amazing. And with, beautiful animation, fire rising from the cauldron, and and with Bernstein's music, doom is upon those in the land, and yep, not looking good. And now that the cauldron is activated and doing the Horn King's evil doing, well, the army of the dead would now start to rise, even when his henchmen kind of try to get a look and poke at it, and because some of the army of the dead, when they would arise, they would actually lunge at the henchmen. And yes, because as mentioned earlier, because of the fact that 12 minutes of the Black Cauldron had to be cut, well, this being one of them where it was very scary and horrific, because I'm sure you guys are aware of this. At one point in 2010, some animation cells of the Black Cauldron that were up on auction on eBay, well, it was of those of what was cut from the Black Cauldron, where we visually see what happened to some of the Horn King's henchmen when the Army of the Dead lunged at them, because one of them just melting and all that and turning into a skeleton. Ugh. And not to mention that bits and pieces of Elmer Bernstein's music was cut. And it's out there on YouTube, a reconstructed version, technically, of what that scene would have been like, and with Bernstein's music accompanying that. I'm sure you're aware of this, and yeah. Oh, well, if only maybe they could have maybe done something else, maybe show more shots of the Army of the Dead, and with Bernstein's music accompanying that, it would have worked, if you get what I'm saying, but oh well, that's just how it was in the end, so yeah. Not to mention, apparently, what else was cut from the Black Cauldron? Apparently, there would have been, a scene, one or two, of basically the princess naked, if you know about that, where in the Black Cauldron where we would have a scene or two where the princess is naked? I'm sure probably she's bathing at one point, but that's baffling. Look, here's the thing. We've technically seen characters bathe in bathtubs and all that, taking showers. Well, best examples, Cinderella and Ariel. You know what I'm talking about. Take those as an example. So maybe if we had seen if we would have seen something like that, but apparently if we were to have seen her naked, maybe not front and center, but maybe say the back of her with something blocking her butt cheeks. You get what I'm saying? Similar to say Cinderella. I don't know, just hard to believe when trying to think of it and go into specific detail, try to patch it up in a light way, but anyways. Okay, but back on point, because well, now the Army of the Dead has risen, many deceased skeleton bodies of past warriors that the Horn King has retrieved, and this would send the Horn King's henchmen running. That would be the last we see of them. They would retreat. They want no part of this. Because now that the Horn King's got his Army of the Dead, I think it's obvious that the Horn King really has no use for his live henchmen. Yeah, well, the Creeper stays right there with the Horn King, so yeah. And yeah, they're moments away. Yeah, the Horn King is moments away from striking fear and doom on those of the land of Pryden. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, unbeknownst to the Horn King and the Creeper, Gurgi is lurking by and, yeah, making his way, and he would help out Taran, Elwani, and Fluter Flam to get out and, try to make a retrieve for it. But that is until, say, when, yeah, Taran at one point, and to still speed things up some, he actually was willing to sacrifice himself, jump into the cauldron, but Gurgi would step in, and he would take the sacrifice. He doesn't want to see Taran or any of his other friends get hurt, and if any of them make a sacrifice, well, in the case of Taran, yeah. You even say at one point Taran, told Elwani and Fluter Flam to get out of there, and, well, thus Taran, yeah, because what he would do. But yeah, in the end, Gurgi, he would make the sacrifice, and it's very emotional, because, the delivery of lines that Gurgi delivers, like, Taran has many friends. Gurgi has no friends. But by this point, he does. And I think it's obvious, and now that Taran is showing concern for what Gurgi's about to do. No, don't jump, which, yep, Gurgi does so. He jumps into the cauldron, making the ultimate sacrifice to take down the Horn King's army of the dead. And yeah, right there, technically Gurgi became the hero. Well, so did Taran, technically. They all did, but definitely the hero credit really is given to Gurgi, basically. Yeah. Also, I meant to mention this. Yeah, I was going to. That at some point in the Black Cauldron, Taran went through puberty. Yeah, it's true, because early on in the film, I mean, he had a higher voice, but as of now, he has a bit of a lower voice. Well, I mean, yeah, this is exactly like what happened with, say, The Sword and the Stone. Yeah, because Arthur went through puberty at one point. Well, the same goes for Taran, because, yeah, Taran's voice actor, Grant Bardsley, yeah, obviously, and I've known about this, where at one point, he did go through some puberty. It's obvious, because, yeah, there would be a change to the voice pitch of Taran at some point in the movie, especially up to now, because, yeah, definitely I can tell. Just, yeah. So again, back on point, Gurgi making the sacrifice, the Horn King and the Creeper would witness the army of the dead just dying, and they would not proceed to strike fear and terror, through the land, and yeah. And, well, the Horn King, pinning this on the Creeper, as usual, thinking that, yeah, his sidekick is to be blamed for, and by grabbing him by the throat / the neck, and the Creeper telling Sire, he refers to him as Sire, perhaps it needs another body, Sire. Yes. Yours, says the Horn King. And, yeah, that's what the Horn King was going to do. He was going to forcibly sacrifice Creeper by throwing him into the cauldron. And when the Horn King is going through the castle and trying to get his army of the dead to wake up and such, even Creeper does so. They're like, wake up, my life is at stake! And the Horn King just getting more aggressively angry, up to when his eyes start to glow red. Oh yeah, that's really awesome. I like when, yeah, at that point, because we see that his eyes glow red. That's a cool effect. And when they spot and notice Taran nearby the cauldron, and yeah, the cauldron is acting haywire. It's going ballistic, technically, and, well, that's when, yeah, the Creeper pointing out that, because Taran being responsible, well, technically it was Gurgi, but yeah, pointing at Taran being responsible for this. So, yeah, the Horn King actually does spare the Creeper, and now he turns his attention to Taran, and confronting Taran and telling him that, you've interfered for the last time, now you shall die. And I think it's obvious that the Horn King will attempt to put Taran in the Black Cauldron. But, yeah, unfortunately, the Horn King is not able to try to take down Taran, as Taran is holding on, and when the cauldron's acting up, it's about to go haywire and such, and on account of what Gurgi did earlier, And the Horned King, he's like slowly but surely being pulled into the cauldron, but still trying to go after Taran. But in the end, well, the cauldron has turned its attention to the Horned King by pulling in the Horned King some more, and the Horned King, like, decapitating and such, yep, and, the Horned King, in the end, would be defeated. He would explode, and yeah, the cauldron consumed him and taking him down. Yeah. It never fails for any Disney villain to be defeated in a pretty satisfying way, a climactic way and such, and in the case of the Horned King. Wouldn't you say so? Yeah. And the Creeper, well, because now he's freed. I mean, he mourns for his master at first, but, you know, now that his master / sire is gone, he's free from being tortured and abused by the Horned King. And, yeah, good for him. I guess in a way, the Creeper had a happy ending, I guess, you know? But yeah. But now that the Horned King's been defeated, well, the Black Cauldron itself is not finished, because then the Black Cauldron would start to have the entire castle crumble, be set into flames. Taran would catch up to Elwani and Fluter Flam, all three of them back together. They would, you know, make their way out of the cauldron, hop on a boat and such, and yeah, they would escape the castle. As, by this point, yeah, as of now, the castle has now been destroyed and crumbled by the Black Cauldron's doing. And we would see Creeper passing by on one of the dragons, and yep, he makes it out of there. He's kind of laughing, you know, at our trio, and I think he took the Horned King's 2 horns and, like, you know, yeah, but yeah, sayonara, Creeper. Hope you have a happy life, I guess, with whatever you're gonna do now that you're no longer under the service of the Horned King. You're under his service. All right. So anyway, so now that they've escaped, well, yeah, Taran, he, of course, is mourning over the loss of Gurgi, and at one point, the 3 witches, they would come back, and they're not finished quite yet. And, yeah, the whole bargaining and such, well, good on Fluter's part. This was a good moment for him, and as I mentioned, because good moments that come from Fluter Flam where he stands up and does something nice and heroic. He stands up confronting the 3 witches, challenging them to the whole bargaining and such, which would lead to them making an agreement and trade that, yeah, in exchange, they will give Taran the sword back. But now he has no interest in wanting the sword and being a warrior. All he cares now is his friend, Gurgi. That's what matters to him most of all. You know, he's got Elwani and Fluter Flam by his side, but all that's missing is Gurgi. So in the end, they would give back Taran Gurgi. They would resurrect him. They would bring him back to life from the cauldron. And yeah, the witches are now finished. They've done their business. Yeah, sayonara, witches. Yeah, now that you have the cauldron back in your possession. And Gurgi, well, he doesn't wake up immediately because, well, I mean, they think he's probably still dead. But, luckily, Gurgi, he tries to pickpocket Taran, like going for, maybe he has food or something, but yeah. Then Taran and Elwani and Fluter Flam, they're happy to see that he's okay. Yep, a happy reunion right there, and thus, yep, the land of Pryden is now at peace, and they don't have to worry about the Horned King anymore with what the Horned King was going to do, summon an army of the dead, and just, yeah. It's all at peace now, the land of Pryden. And yep, all 4 of our main characters, they go off their merry way, having their happily ever after. You know, even say at one point when, you know, both Elwani and Taran, they went in for a hug with Gurgi. Gurgi, you know, very mischievous, in a good way, actually had them kiss one another. Just, yeah, like putting their, yeah, put their heads, like, you know, kissing, just... Well, and obviously, because, yeah, a romance slowly but surely building up between both Taran and Elwani. And, you know, probably, I assume that eventually Taran would become prince alongside with Elwani. She's princess, and maybe that would lead to Taran becoming prince. Yeah. But as I said, our 4 main characters going off their merry way, having their happily ever after, and we would see Henwin, Dalbin, and Dolly witnessing from the magical pool of water, yeah, that, you know, Taran did a heroic thing as well as along with his new friends, and Dalbin's very proud of Taran, that in the end Taran did a heroic thing, was very brave, and all that. Yeah, what a great way to end off the film, and with the end credits. We technically get a little bit of like an epilogue, because yeah, with all of them reuniting with Dalbin, etc. Just yeah, and also on account of the fair folks. So yeah, but the end credits were nice, and with the music that plays, Bernstein's music, just couldn't forget to mention the end credits. The Black Cauldron itself, again, it may not be the best Disney hand-drawn animated film of all time and such. It's not up there with all the other greats, especially those in the Disney Renaissance. But at the same time, in the later years, it's grown a cult following, it's got more love and appreciation, me being one of them, and I'm sure the same goes for some of you. And yeah, it's great to see that it's more appreciative, than how it was, say, in 1985. Nothing of the sort. The Black Cauldron itself, from beginning to end, the story, the cast of characters, good voice acting, good animation, the music and score by Elmore Bernstein, fantastic, the intenseful, climactic moments, the film's main antagonist, the Horned King, a very great underrated Disney villain for sure. Bits and pieces, some funny moments here and there, the emotional moments, some funny lines here and there, and with what else goes on in the Black Cauldron, just overall, the Black Cauldron, it may not be the best. Sure, it had bad luck, but again, with the film nowadays having more love and appreciation, it's great to see, and yeah, for me, and I'm sure the same goes for some of you, I really enjoy it for what it is. Yeah. And I'm giving the Black Cauldron, why not? I'm giving it 7 out of 10 stars. That's good enough, don't you think? Yeah. 7 out of 10 stars for the Black Cauldron. And what about you guys? What did you think of the Black Cauldron itself? Would this be in your top favorite Disney films? Animated films, to be more precise. What are your fondest memories of the Black Cauldron? The first time you discovered this and watched this. Rather, if you watched it on TV, or if you had a DVD or VHS copy, or of course, watching it on digital, like most prominently Disney+. Any of the characters you enjoyed and had no problem with, like, most prominently Taran and Gurgi, and if the film's antagonist slash main villain, the Horned King, is one of your top favorite Disney villains. Yeah. Favorite moments to come from the Black Cauldron, favorite funny moments, and if you got a bit teary-eyed and, loved the music that comes from the Black Cauldron, especially on account of the Horned King, oh yeah, as I mentioned. Overall, again, what do you think of the Black Cauldron itself, with what all I've had to say, my review, and what did you think of my review of the Black Cauldron? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. And so, guys, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of the Black Cauldron. More review videos are coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I will see you guys in the next video / review. And of course, continuing on with the Disney Animated Movie Week, it's just begun. Stay tuned later tonight, because what I will be reviewing next, well, a decade later, and 10 years after The Black Cauldron came out, well, one of these Disney animated films that came out in 1995, well, because this one in particularly, it's hard to believe that how much of a huge impact this one Disney animated film from 1995 would leave off. And yeah, this being a father and son road trip. And yeah, this starring our favorite beloved, clumsy, goofy character. Yeah, I think you know exactly what it is that I'm talking about. Oh, yes. Bet you're looking forward to that. Just, yeah, okay. Again, stay tuned for that. A part of the Disney Animated Movie Week. Take care, happy anniversary to the Black Cauldron, and peace out.